Random House Audio presents The Terminal Spy, a true story of espionage, betrayal, and murder by Alan S. Cowell. Read for you by John Lee. The English autumn was unseasonably warm, and November the 1st, 2006, the day Alexander Litvinenko began to die, was no exception. A breeze from the northwest rustled leaves, turned gold on the trees of Muswell Hill, a demure suburb of Edwardian row houses in North London. The temperature was in single digits on the Celsius scale, but well above freezing. The red double-deck buses ran in their familiar, not quite predictable way. Life unfolded with the unhurried complacency of far-flung neighbourhoods, when those abandoned to humdrum routines pause between the day's panicky bookends: the school run, the supermarket, the dry cleaner, the post office, furtive affairs, perhaps, behind hastily drawn curtains. The climate, not to mention the tranquility, must have seemed incongruous to Litvinenko, a one-time secret agent turned whistleblower, an exile and defector from his native Russia and bitter enemy of its regime. Raised for many years in the northern Caucasus, he had trained for a career in the KGB to spy on his comrades, to interrogate ragged child prisoners from Chechnya, and to chase down the Russian mafia in Moscow. But Litvinenko had turned his back on all that, on everything he had been taught to do as the Soviet Union dissolved into the new Russia. Brazenly, he defied his masters in Moscow, betraying what he insisted were their innermost secrets. Now it was payback time, although, as so often in matters of deceit, the victim was the last to know. On this day in late 2006, the last, when his life might pass for normal within the somewhat abnormal émigré circles he inhabited, Litvinenko bade farewell to his elegantly coiffed wife, Marina, and his gifted 12-year-old son, Anatoly, of whom he was exceptionally proud. He headed for the city centre, the capital of his own adoptive land. Just weeks earlier, on October the 13th, Litvinenko and his family had been granted citizenship, and he boasted happily to friends that he was British. He brandished his pristine plum-coloured passport, proclaiming with an almost childish delight that it was his protector, the freshly burnished shield of this crusader against evil, this champion of the free, this tilter at windmills, some thought, this swashbuckling D'Artagnan. To mark the family's new status, his son hung their new banner, the red-on-white cross of St. George, the English emblem, from the first-floor balcony of the Litvinenko's pale brick townhouse, a mile north of the centre of Muswell Hill, at 140 Ossia Crescent. In many ways, the journey from his semi-gentrified suburb to Mayfair, London's swankiest square mile, offered a metaphor for his own life, caught between dream and reality, between modest circumstance and grand vision. On this day, Litvinenko is spry of foot, nimble in his early 40s. His thoughts are in the London of five-star hotels and wealthy shopping streets, of discreet whispering offices and plump consultancies, of contact with his erstwhile peers in the KGB, with people who, like him, inhabit an opaque world between illusion and reality, between conspiracy and riches. Most days when he headed into town, Marina would drive him to the Northern Line subway station at East Finchley to catch a southbound train on the High Barnet branch, a routine commuter ride through some of the city's oldest, deepest, grimiest tunnels. On that day, though, she had made promises to friends. She had other things to do, and he did not mind making his own way. He took a bus to start his journey, then the subway, using an electronic blue plastic ticket the size of a credit card, called an Oyster card. For most Londoners, the cards were a commonplace, a device for discounted travel on the public systems, linked to a central computer through terminals on buses and in subway stations. For Litvinenko, the card would offer a vital clue to the timing of a murder. To look at him with his sandy hair and boyish mouth, perched on his seat, peering indifferently at the city, luring him to his destiny, to its dark and glistening heart, you would not know that this is a man on such critical missions as Litvinenko has in mind. His cover is intact. He does not stand out from the crowd. No one in his immediate circle, not even his wife, rarely knows what the day is supposed to bring or what it will, in fact, yield. No one would guess at this precise moment that the fate of Alexander Litvinenko will nudge east and west toward a revival of the Cold War. On November 1st, 2006, Alexander Litvinenko was celebrating the anniversary of his flight from Russia to Britain. He had arrived, by a circuitous route, exactly 6 years earlier, on November 1st, 2000. He had been given political asylum in 2001 as a precursor to citizenship. But, whatever the passport proclaimed him to be, Alexander Litvinenko, aged 43 years and 11 months, never to reach 44, was still steeped in Russia, as his CV had molded him to be. Former counterintelligence officer in the Dzerzhinsky division of the Interior Ministry troops, former operative of the KGB, the Soviet Committee for State Security, and former lieutenant colonel in its domestic successor, the FSB, the Federal Security Service. In exile, he followed and fueled Moscow's conspiracies, writing articles on dissident websites, publishing books, giving interviews to anyone offering a platform for his tirades against the Kremlin. He fed on news from the motherland, sought information assiduously, placing calls back to Moscow, exchanging emails across what had been the Iron Curtain. He sought friendships and information from those who visited from Russia. His grasp of English was imperfect, halting, and some of the people he met in London told him he should try harder. His wife, by contrast, became fluent in the language, and his son Anatoly won academic acclaim in his English classes at an upmarket private school. But he missed no opportunity to demonize the rulers of modern Russia, Vladimir Putin in particular. Only days before his final commute, Alexander Litvinenko rose among an audience at the Frontline Club, a boozy journalist's haunt in the side streets near Paddington Railroad Station, to denounce Putin in the murder in Moscow, on October 7th, 2006, of Anna Politkovskaya, a Russian investigative reporter of some renown, shot dead in the lobby of her apartment house, coincidentally on Putin's 54th birthday. "My speech is difficult for me. Can I use translator?" he inquired in accented English to preface his verbal assault on the Kremlin, one of many j'accuse moments in his émigré life. Litvinenko lived among dislocated exiles, condemned to pine for a homeland that no longer existed in the way they recalled, and had not changed in the way they hoped. His passion was to expose the iniquities of his home country, to burrow under the Kremlin walls, shielding the new elite. Among his friends and acquaintances, he counted former spy masters and Soviet-era dissidents, Chechen separatists, at least one self-exiled tycoon. He moved in a twilit, ambiguous world of rumor and riddles, populated by plotters and fantasists, hoodlums and propagandists. He cultivated people who, like himself in his final months, sought to parlay a KGB training into careers in private security, industrial espionage. He was big on ideas, short of cash. After his death, the Kremlin went to great lengths to belittle Litvinenko as a thug, a lowlife, a former guard on military convoys, a man of no substance. But why, then, did someone spend so much money and time, and flawed ingenuity, to ensure that he would be launched, unwittingly, onto the trajectory of the most macabre and gruesome assassination of modern times? If he was a nobody, why snuff out the last flicker of his nonentity with such lurid drama? But if he was more than the Kremlin depicted him to be, what had he done to deserve a death that depended on such ingenuity and cruelty? On November 1st, 2006, Litvinenko's mental diary listed a series of critical meetings. All of them foreshadowed his murder, but one of them at least seemed improbable, melodramatic, if not pathetic. He made a late start in Muswell Hill and headed into town. He bought a newspaper from a newsstand sometime after noon at Piccadilly Circus, within sight of the statue of Eros, one of his landmark rendezvous points in central London, at the junction of some of the city's main thoroughfares, Regent Street, Shaftesbury Avenue, and Piccadilly. That day he met with a man called Mario Scaramella, who walked west with him for a late lunch 300 yards away in the Itsu Sushi Bar on Piccadilly.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?